The story started out of the blue for me. My Zephyr is a 25-year-old, just came home after living there for a long period. When working overseas, I departed when I was 22, deciding to seek a profession in a distant far location, and for those 3 years I could only get in touch with my family via infrequent phone calls, but this time I made the decision to go back to my hometown to see my family after being away for so long. The moment I walked into the house, I knew a sense of both comfort and unusualness returned quickly, and my parents were incredibly moving to see me once more, and the entire family spent the first night together. Remembering past experiences and the food my mother prepared and the laughter that I missed a lot, but what caught me off guard, Maris, my younger sister, most affected me. When I saw Maris last, she was still a quiet but sweet little girl who enjoyed conceal herself behind me whenever she encountered unfamiliar people, but as Maris emerged from I couldn't believe they had a place to welcome me. In my view, she had grown into a tall adult. She was certain that her long hair was loose. She had a smile on her face and bright eyes. Was quiet but friendly. It was an odd sensation, as though you should meet someone in person. Zephyr, it's new but still familiar. Maris, it's been a while since I last saw you. Remarked, grinning, her voice now full of I pulled it off, with a maturity I didn't anticipate. Her into a firm embrace. When did you mature? Become so large that I failed to recognize you any longer. I made fun of Maris and laughed at her. Faces reddened, but they remained silent. I couldn't stop staring the entire evening. Every action Maris took toward her bringing back old memories, yet concurrently I became aware of how much she had changed. Something about the manner in which the way she chuckled when she spoke made me feel perplexed by a mix of familiarity and the elusive new. When nightfall arrived, I went to my space to relax following the lengthy travel. My mother still preserved the old room. Every little detail brings back memories. I was so exhausted that I opted to shower first. Using the warm water from the bed to the shower appeared to remove all the exhaustion from the lengthy journey, providing me with a sensation of calm and relief. Following, I put on a loose t-shirt while having a shower and rest on the old bed with the intention of nap, but as soon as the lights were shut off, the silence and the darkness caused my thoughts to wander to pictures of my relatives. Of the past, particularly Maris's, emerging in my head. I was unable to consider her and the way she had altered regarding the tender but perceptive glance I attempted to push those that she had given me. Putting aside my worries, I tell myself that it was simply an odd sensation to see my sister once more after a long time apart, yet the more I made an effort to ignore her image got more distinct in my imagination. Maris's smile came back to me when the way she cocked her head suggested that she was shy. A little bit, while hearing her parents talk about every gesture and every little thing. Expression appeared to have been etched in as my thoughts lay on the bed. I became aware that I was having emotional difficulties of my own, but ultimately, I let everything go and left just a soft sensation, along with a little distress and shame in my heart. In the dark, I came to the realization that everything was so silent around me, that silent enough for me to hear my own breathing, but I was unable to calm my mind. Put Maris out of your mind and quit, considering how she had undergone so much change in 3 years that I felt as though I was meeting someone entirely new. Old recollections of her continued to surface. When we were younger, she would call me brother and follow me wherever. Zephyr was waiting for me, and I recalled that she would occasionally hide behind me while she was afraid, of the moments when she leaped to her feet and down with joy when I presented her with a tiny present. But now Maris wasn't the she used to be, a tiny child. The way she grinned, the expression in her eyes said it all. Possessed the charisma and self-assurance that I unfamiliar. I sighed quietly. I tried to lull myself to sleep by closing my eyes. Slumber, but a gentle tap on the door opened my eyes, and my brother Zephyr, is you're still up? When Maris's voice arrived. I sat up quietly from outside the door. I'm a little shocked that you're awake. What's going on? The door opened, and Maris stepped out. Is still dressed in the basic nightgown. It highlighted her slender body. She sheepishly grinned while perched on the edge of the bed. She murmured, I can't sleep, pressed her hands together, avoiding my gaze. As though she was considering something. I just wanted to have a little conversation with you. It's been a long time since we've met. I nodded while attempting to maintain my voice. Casual, sure, it's been a while, but what would you mind telling me that we began? Introducing basic tales regarding each other's life and family work, Maris described to me her days spent at home, discussing her studies with her parents regarding the small pleasures she had encountered, but the more we conversed, the more I understood that occasionally her eyes appeared to be ambiguous, as if there were something she was afraid to say. Brother Zur halted abruptly, her hands clenching. Do you believe it's closer when two people they may alter after living apart for a long time? So much that they've lost their comprehension one another. As before her inquiry, I paused and tried to read while glancing at her. I believe that in her eyes, but if there's still a link between them, things will proceed, I answered. Go back to how they were. Maris gave a small smile, but it wasn't an utterly joyful grin. I hope. So we sat in the faint light. There I sensed a sudden change in the air. Her intimacy, the warmth of her gentle breathing when sitting nearby, but with I couldn't handle the discomfort that followed. Tell Maris what's wrong, please. Disturbing you? I inquired quietly in an attempt to maintain my composure. She didn't respond. She immediately merely gave a small shake of her head. I guess I'm just thinking, honey. Nothing. Too much, so she got up and grinned. Me again. All right, I'm returning to my room. I promise not to annoy you any longer. Good night, Maris, I said. Good night, brother. However, I was still thinking about issues left unanswered when she stepped. I went out and shut the door after sitting there for a brief moment gazing into the shadowy area. In a weird sensation in front of me rose in my heart that is weird and familiar, as if between us, something had changed, but I didn't want to confront it, so I reclined on the bed, but I couldn't stop thinking about returning to the picture of her half. Maris closed her eyes and spoke quietly as she walked away. There was something peculiar about that. She gave me the impression that she wanted to, but I didn't dare take the time to say anything. Slowly went by, and the only sound that made the greater uneasiness in my heart declared at last incapable of bearing the suffocation. I made the decision to visit for a drink in the kitchen in the hopes of calming my atmosphere. As I descended the stairs in the dark, I stopped when I saw the light in the living room. I peered through the partially ajar door. Then noticed Maris seated on the couch, her arms embracing a pillow with her legs raised. Her gaze remained focused on the television, but her eye walked in with a clearly absent mind. Are you going to be quiet so as not to shock her? Maris, still awake, gave a slight jump, then turned her face toward me. I was a little ashamed that I couldn't sleep, thus I came down here to spend some time watching TV. Sat down beside her, maintaining a cozy distance. What's the matter? Been agitated ever since I arrived home. She pursed her lips and gazed down at. After a time, she released her clenched hands. It's nothing, honey, I said, shaking her head. I suppose it's just peculiar because it's been a long time since you returned home. Didn't compel her, but the environment was still oddly tense between us. Saw Maris, identifying the mature characteristics of her face, yet simultaneously I once noticed something delicate, like though she were keeping something from her that she didn't wish or be unable to inform you of what I stated, attempting to lighten the atmosphere. When I initially returned, I also felt weird. You've changed so drastically that I felt as though I'm meeting Maris, a total stranger. Her eyes flashed as she turned to face me. Whether it's a positive or terrible development, surprises, I tried to maintain my voice while grinning. Brother. Bright, that's wonderful, you've matured. Maris is mature and quite attractive. Reddened upon hearing those remarks, and she promptly turned aside, but she was unable to conceal a grin briefly appeared on her lips. Thank you, she said in a whisper. It was so soft that I had to listen carefully. Was a lengthy pause that was only broken by the TV hummed faintly before Maris spoke. Mr. Zephyr, I, gently breaking the stillness, I have a query, but I fear I found it odd that I arched an eyebrow at when she asks. I swear to give a thoughtful response. Maris bit her lip in contemplation. Anything, after which she exhaled deeply. If two individuals were formerly very close to one another, and then all of a sudden, one individual feels differently about the other person, that's incorrect. Her query resembled a needle piercing my feelings. I had been attempting to push away. After seeing her once more, I was unsure of how to respond, but I felt the desire in her eyes to have some sort of justification. "I believe our emotions are always correct, Maris," I said gently. "Cal, I'm trying to maintain my voice, but how do you think it's important to act on them?" "Understand what I mean," Maris gave a small nod, but turned without saying anything more. Returning to gaze at the TV screen as though disoriented in her own mind, recognizing that she didn't force myself to say anything more. But I couldn't ignore the fact that my heart was accelerating with each hammering heartbeat. A part of me longed to leave my chest to escape this uncomfortable circumstance, yet my eyes couldn't be taken by another part of me. Off her at last, I got up and tried to maintain my natural voice. "Okay? I believe I should avoid staying up too late and go to bed. There is still plenty of time for us to." Maris looked up at me and said, "Talk tomorrow." "Good night, brother." I nodded a little. I responded, "Night, Maris," but as I walked out of I couldn't help but feel in the living room that our relationship was progressively being swapped out with something that neither of us ventured to identify. I went back to my room, softly shutting the door as though hesitant to disturb the house's silence. However, the quiet only made me think more. The question from chaotic Maris kept reverberating, and I have a spiraling head with no way out. If two individuals were previously really near one another, then all of a sudden one person's perception of the other is that question incorrect? Everything about the way she gazed at me was similar to an implicit admission, but it was sufficient to cause me to feel uneasy, and I couldn't ignore how nervous I felt after seeing Maris. I had experienced the same emotions once more. Conflict I didn't want to acknowledge, didn't want to consider, but now her inquiry evoked those emotions. I lay on the bed since it was suddenly inevitable, staring at the ceiling with wide-open eyes, attempting to ignore the tangled thoughts. However, the picture of Maris continued to be visible. Her grin and the way her eyes. She sat on the couch next to me, staring, bewildered but eager as well. For a long period, they tossed and turned till when the emotion got too much, I made the decision to stand up and enter the balcony. To take in the street's fresh air. The peaceful night was shadowed by lights, and the sky full of stars added a little peace, however, is insufficient to eliminate my heart was in disarray as I stood there. Noticed a faint sound emanating from I turned the steps and found Maris standing. Her gaze was unquestionably locked on me there. "I couldn't sleep," she whispered. As I approached, "I noticed your door open, so I nodded in an attempt to see if you may as well. To keep things informal, I simply came out here." "Are you all right, Maris?" Mara, to get some air, stood beside me, holding her hand softly. She was holding onto the railing and staring up. "It's all right at the sky, it just feels it's odd that you returned there, isn't it?" "A lot of feelings that I'm not sure how to manage." I listen in silence, unsure of what to say. Mentioned that her voice had a certain quality that prevented me from being able to. Zephyr. Maris interrupted and went on with her, "Do you have a delicate, slightly shaky voice? Have you ever had the feeling that those closest to you can also be the most confusing thing to you?" The inquiry went straight to the core. Feelings within me. I looked at her eyes were waiting as though they were looking for Maris. Something inside of me started not. I'm not sure what to say, but occasionally our emotions don't always go as planned. How we handle things is what counts. You understand what I mean? Maris gave her a nod. Kept staring at me, but this time, something was different. Intimacy and conflict that I was unable to describe. How she stood very next to me. Gentle breath entering the atmosphere between us, reducing the already delicate distance. I could feel my heart racing with every heartbeat, reverberating in my chest. Desired to take a back seat, but another aspect of I couldn't look away from her. "Maris." Whispered her name, my voice choking by my feelings, but before saying anything more, she took a step toward the gap between us has nearly vanished. I sensed her power, fragility, and warmth. Entangled, but at that very instant, like a shock dragging me out of my daze, retreated a step in an attempt to maintain. For what small reason did I leave Maris? Can't I say that my voice is shaking? Daring to gaze at her directly, This is incorrect, my sister." She looked at her eyes were full of emotion, and I was unable to read, but she didn't mention anything, then just gave a small nod. Walked back into the home after turning aside. I just stood there without saying anything. Seeing her form vanish broke my heart. characterized by a sense of insecurity and perplexity, so I returned to my room. Lie on the bed, although it was difficult to fall asleep. Putting the tight emotions aside, I couldn't avoid all intimate moments between since I came back. Maris and I have maintained coming without leaving any trace in her wake. When she first spotted me, she smiled shyly. Insightful inquiries. The manner in which she came up to me on the balcony appeared to be guiding me towards something that didn't want to acknowledge that the following morning I awakened to the first rays of the day streamed past my body's door. Was heavy after a nearly empty night. Sleep, but there wasn't time to reflect either. Mostly due to the steamy smell, the kitchen's coffee served as a reminder that everybody has begun a fresh day. As I noticed Maris when I came down the stairs. Observing the essential oil producer while preparing coffee, she wore a loose jeans and a t-shirt, appear cozy. But she was just as beautiful when she saw me. Maris turned around and smiled gently at me. However, I noticed right away the serenity in "Good morning, brother," she said, her eyes attempting to seem natural in her voice. "I prepared coffee, are you up for a cup?" I tried not to show it as I replied, "Thank you." I took a seat at the table in awe. Observing her as she added the coffee powder to the ring as her fingers moved softly, a gesture that only I could have imagined. Observed that we were seated opposite one another. Atmosphere that is calm but full of things I knew she wanted to say but didn't say. I also wanted to break something. This quietness, but each time I opened my mouth, I was unable to locate a reasonable. In the end, Maris provided the explanation. "I apologize if I was the first to speak, Mr. Zephyr. Make you uneasy last night. I didn't intend to generate conflict." I discreetly observed her, observing the genuineness in her gaze, but also that she was attempting to hide her unhappiness. "But it's okay. I simply didn't know what to do." Maris mentioned that everything was very surprising. She put down the coffee and nodded. I can understand. Powder in front of her. Perhaps I'm also perplexed about myself. Didn't know how to react to what she said. Were a disclosure I wasn't prepared to make. But I couldn't remain hidden indefinitely. Refused to allow her to feel isolated in her distinctiveness. Maris, I started speaking. We're brothers, and things can change with time. Make things odd, but I think that will go as long as we continue to have mutual respect. All will turn out okay. Maris glanced at me tenderly, as if her eyes wanted to speak, but she held back. After some time, she gave a small nod. Yes, perhaps I'm simply overthinking it. Maris stayed away from me all day after breakfast. She handled the majority of the household tasks. The house, from tidying up to moving. I didn't attempt to enter the living room, either, believing that we both required time to resolve our emotions, yet the strain wasn't reduced by distance, it only made me more agitated at night. My parents' declaration that they were heading to a friend's house and would be. I sensed the scenario when I returned for the night becoming increasingly intricate. It was now just in the house with Maris. I planned to prevent unpleasant situations, arrive at my room early. Circumstances, but then I heard a kind Maris knock on my door. I called to open it. Opening the door to discover her standing there having a calm, slim face while working on a project. "Could you please come out and speak with me first?" she asked gently, almost pleadingly. I wanted to say no, but my eyes convinced me unfeasible. I nodded, and we went outdoors. Proceeded to the living area where Maris. The room was filled with gentle golden light. I took a seat on the couch and sat down safely. Distant from her, I only desired to describe Mara's shaky voice. "I do not wish for you to consider myself a stranger, or that I'm attempting to act improperly. I simply have no control over my feelings." When I heard those words, my heart skipped a beat. To cut her off, but I wasn't sure what to state. That Zephyr. Maris kept looking at me. "I'm aware of how I'm feeling." "Yes, but I'm not sure how to stop her." Words pierced my heart like a knife. Yet simultaneously they also emphasized a point. I had been trying not to cry because I wanted to console, telling her that everything would be all right. All right, but how could I when I wasn't certain? Despite my own emotions, I gazed at her regarding to speak, but she got to her feet. Reverting to myself, I shouldn't have. I regret saying this after giving it more thought. That she left me and hurried away. Once more sitting there with mixed feeling in the living room, I sat quietly, the gentle golden light that can't warm the chill that surrounded my heart, the feelings that Maria expressed in her remarks, and my own sense of powerlessness were all accumulating like a cork ready to. I couldn't help but blame myself when it exploded. How could I have allowed this to happen? Of me desired to leave the house. Away from everything in order for me to must look into her eyes, or what I was emotion, but something else stopped me. Preventing me from leaving what I didn't want to abandon her in this condition. Her to believe she was abandoned or alone. I got up and ascended the stairs, gently. Halting before a room's entrance, the only ajar for a door, and the light from her room's table lamp shone into. I knocked in the warm but dim corridor. Whispering so gently that only I could listen, "Maris, might I just enter?" There wasn't in response. I opened the door and discovered Maris is seated on the bed's edge. With her hands folded in her lap, her head bent. She didn't give me a look, but I could tell she knew I was here. "Maris," I said, taking a seat next to her on the bed, "I am not sure how to express how I feel. Better, but I want you to know that I'm here. Recognize that you are not alone in your suffering." Maris looked at me with her eyes full of tears, yet none of them fell. "Zephyr, I realize I'm mistaken. But I've tried, but I can't get rid of this feeling. However, whenever I see you, I simply can't." I took a big breath and stopped thinking about you. I realized I needed to take a breath to relax myself. I couldn't say anything that would alleviate her internal conflict or even within me, but I had to say something. Something to prevent us from going further down into the unmanageable feelings we experienced. I added in my voice, "Maris, you're my sister." Slowly but steadily, these emotions could be the outcome of spending so much time alone, creating unexpected situations, but it's remembering who we are is crucial. And how we contribute to one another's. Maris remained silent as she gazed at her eyes were filled with pain, and I could also in pursuit of a little hope. "You're correct. However, I'm not sure how to forget this. I simply want things to end, Zephyr. Returning to their previous state, when I was just you and your younger sister were the older sibling I've always looked up to." I gently put my hand on her shoulder. "But comforting touch, which I also desire. Maris, and I think time will be beneficial. I'll be here if you make it through it. Helping you locate what we used to have closeness of brotherly love, but not surpassing the boundary that we are both aware of." Maris nodded and leaned, unable to be crossed. Gently resting her head on my shoulder as though in an attempt to find solace at that time, we sat in that position for a while, neither of us uttering any words, simply letting the area surrounding us merges into the silence, which was necessary for us both to relax. I got up and smiled gently at her. "You should go to bed, Maris. Tomorrow is a fresh day. Think we'll be all right." Maris grinned. A smile that's a touch melancholy, but also glad. "Good night, Mr. Zephyr, many thanks." I shut the door to her room and felt as though I had crossed a thin but essential line. Everything remained chaotic within myself, but I was aware that I had made the wise decision to preserve what was correct. In spite of the challenging feelings, I felt lighter as I lay in bed that night. For the first time in my difficult days, I was aware that the path ahead would be simple, but at least we had started taking the initial stages of her recovery, and I discovered for myself from this tale a deep understanding that feelings are an inherent aspect of being human. However, how we confront and manage them ascertains everything. Can be caught at times entangled in contradictory feelings, particularly when sudden changes cause familiar views, but what matters most is must pause, examine the issue objectively, and I've learned to pick the correct route. That love is more than just a sentiment but also an obligation to other people and to protect yourself, as needed. Setting limits, especially when they are challenging, is the sole method to ensure respect and the connections you value in life. You will occasionally encounter powerful and complex feelings, even ones that are unclear regarding the connections and yourself surrounding you. When that occurs, keep in mind that while feelings are normal, behaviors ought to be directed by morality and wisdom. It takes time to comprehend your values. Feelings rather than passing judgment or taking action on, they adhere to significant limits in connections since they are the basis for preserving attachment and confidence. See a trusted family member if you're feeling lost. members, friends, or pay attention to your emotions, but never forget your heart. Self-control shields you not only from errors, but also protects the valuable relationships you value. My tale comes to an end here with teachings that will last and a feeling of relief that everything is appropriately viewed and managed. Life goes on. And I think that with genuineness and respect, we'll keep this holy. Thank you for the family bond. If you find time, listen to our story. Fascinating and significant. Remember to support by leaving a like. See you in the upcoming videos. Offer everyone a lifetime of happiness. Joyful and well.